G'day, brothers and sisters. This is the other Paul, and welcome to my second episode of the Christendom Weekly. Today, for the 24th of September, Australia time, 2021, or the 23rd for you Yankees and Dixies out there. Welcome along. Hope you're all going to enjoy. Now, today's is just going to be, for today, I'm just going to have one story, both because I've been a little bit busy, especially with my new ramping up of content for this channel, so a little bit busy for making stories, although I'm considering a new strategy to be able to get through it more efficiently so that I can have multiple stories at once with less of the effort, at least all at once. But nonetheless, there's one story this week that is especially pertinent here in Australia, and really it's worth an entire segment on its own, so I'm just going to briefly go over that. And as you can see with this first article over here, the tradies, or for you Americans out there, the construction workers, they've been causing a bit of a, excuse me, a little bit of a, how would I say it, trouble for the Victoria government, because I can't get exact dates because I'm just trying to go back in time for these articles through Google. It's just ridiculous because tons and tons of articles are coming out all the time and they're all jittered and like just scrambled and all that, so it's really hard to find like the initial stuff to get exact dates for what's happening. But roughly speaking, late last week to early this week, the Victorian state government started putting in extra measures for mandating vaccinations, needles. Gotta remember, don't want to get the algorithm on the wrong side, but mandating the needles for construction workers in Victoria. Now, in New South Wales, curiously enough, this has already been a case for a while. Construction workers, you need to be double jabbed, simple as that. And I've known people in my family who, like all over, large family, who have simply just said, no, stuff it, I'm not going to continue my job and just quit work just because they're being coerced into getting a treatment that they don't have full consent towards. But also the the job seeker welfare program is extremely generous, so it's not exactly an end of the world scenario if you lose your job, at least in this state. But in Victoria, the tradies there have not really having it. They're not taking it. First, it started with far out this. So let me take a sip. It's just all this stuff caught in my throat. Anyway, it started with a ban on tea rooms on construction sites by Dictator Dan, as he's called, Daniel Andrews, the Premier / Chairman of the state of Victoria. Started with a ban on tea rooms, at least for the unvaccinated so far. I believe it's total, but I think the plan is to allow the fully vaccinated to use the tea rooms. So that started off. That happened, and then the tradies in Victoria started a massive protest by blocking a good ton of roads outside of their construction sites with tables and chairs so they can go and have their smoko. Again, for non-Australian, smoko, smoking/smoking break, which would be lunch, drink, and of course the smoke. So they're blocking off traffic, as you can see here in this little preview to the video, blocking off traffic as part of big protests, and just having their smoko and lunch break there. And Victoria government, they couldn't really do much about it, because this was happening across Melbourne, the capital city of Victoria, and I think outside there as well. Now also, the more draconian thing that happened is what is already the case in Victoria, and that is mandating vaccines, double jabs for construction workers, and having a deadline first for when you're booked to have your first dose, and then eventually for being double jabbed. Otherwise, you will not be allowed on your work site, according to Dictator Dan. Simple as that. Apart from health exemptions, he says, no, having none of it. We're not going to be doing that. So this is the guy right here. This is the agent of Satan working right now, which he is, just simply oppressing his people. Pretty much a textbook wicked ruler, talked about in the book of Proverbs all throughout. So this is the face of evil today, and I've got to say it's quite underwhelming. But either way. So that's what's happening right now. Now after this, okay, now this is the big one. After the vax mandate, late last week, early this week, construction workers started to approach their unions, in particular the main union, the biggest union really for construction workers, the CFMEU, who've pretty much had a track record of just pretty much being an unofficial Labour Party branch, and not really giving a rat's about workers' rights. And they've shown that again today, because even though their leader, John Setka, claims to be against mandatory vaxxers, he's done nothing about it. And the CFMEU has simply said, no, you're just going to go along with it, workers. We're not going to actually fight for your rights at all, even though that's our entire flipping job and you're paying us to do that. We're just not going to do that. So what happened? Tradies rock up and start a brawl at the CFMEU headquarters in Melbourne. They all rocked up in protest. It was initially a silent protest. John Setka came out and he was just blabbing on. They weren't having it. Eventually they started to try and grab him. And then the crowd of tradies all just started to try and rush into the building and trash it. And they did trash a lot of the front area of it, like windows, the entrance and all. It was quite crazy to watch. But that's the state of affairs, basically. Victoria's tradies, I don't know what's up with my state's tradies, but Victoria's tradies just did not have none of it. They went absolutely berserk. And now, for the past, 3 days, tradies have en masse been just marching through the city of Melbourne in protest, having occasional conflicts with the Melbourne police and even the riot squad, especially 2 days ago at the Shrine of Remembrance. You can look up footage for that, and I may post a link or two for that, but it was quite disgusting. Not only tradies, but other people have been joining in those protests as well, but primarily tradies now, especially now that their line of work is basically under threat by dictator Dan. So that's what's happening. It's pretty crazy. I wish I could show footage, but I'm still trying to find out what the arbitrary rules are by YouTube for what other videos I can show, whether I get copy striked or not. So I'm not going to show stuff yet, but I will place some links below so you can go look at it yourself. Either way, it is really crazy stuff. So basic timeline, banning tea rooms, so tradies block off roads, mandating double jabs at a certain deadline, and before that at least being booked for your first jab. So then the tradies in response go to their unions. Unions don't help at all, despite that being their very job to protect workers' rights. And then this massive brawl at one of the union headquarters, and now mass protests for multiple days in the road. And even, get this, I'll post another link below because I forgot to actually get this, but the Daniel Andrews government has even banned media helicopters from flying over Melbourne to get footage. They're trying to do a Soviet-style media blackout in Melbourne so that people just simply can't see what's happening. I was barely able to find footage for yesterday. There was no media reporting on stuff. The media now, they're saying, oh, but our rights are threatened. We shouldn't do this. So they love to trample over other people's rights. Love to celebrate when people's rights are being taken over. But as soon as their privileges are being inconvenienced, oh no, please help us. Anyway, neither here nor there. So that's why it's really hard to find stuff now. And there's a select few YouTubers right now who I'm following who are actually able to get at least regular pieces of live on-the-ground footage from Melbourne, especially starting from yesterday. I'm going to link them below as well so you can actually see what's happening on the ground. And you can compare and contrast it to the slander of major pundits and media here in Australia. Especially on this one claim. This is a really big one, that there's neo-Nazis. The Nazi menace, they're back again at the protest. And you can find tons of media articles on that, and even the Victorian Police Commissioner saying, yes, we know of neo-Nazis who are participating in this thing, which is, of course, absolute red herring. Does not refute the fact that this is nonetheless a tradie revolt by ordinary working men whose lives are being threatened. Livelihoods, rather, in some cases even their lives, being threatened by the the chairman of Victoria. So yeah, you'll see a lot of red herring around that. So, as I promised, this is going to be slightly more structured. So this was at least my attempt at simply stating the news, what happened, and now to give my little commentary. So I guess at this point, bang, for my knowledge. Yep, cool, got it. This will be where we transition to commentary phase. Now, what do we make of this? What do we make of these basically tradie uprisings? First thing I think it shows is that those in power, so you got your Daniel Andrews, you got your state cabinets, really across all of Australia, because they're more or less most Australian states, so they're more or less the same. It's just that Chairman Andrews is unlucky enough to have tradies with as much backbone as this, but also their supporters, people who are typically quite affluent, have a very very decent lifestyle, live in more affluent areas. Who love to comment online saying, "Oh, these tradies, how selfish are they? They're so selfish. They're going to prolong this. They're gonna spread the coof. It's going to be a super spreader event." And just being absolutely tone deaf to the needs and the welfare of the working class man, because their only metric is to bring down coof numbers. That's it. No other metric in this world matters. It doesn't matter if 12 people jumped off a building tomorrow due to having their livelihoods taken from them because of jab mandates. That wouldn't matter, because those kinds of deaths and injuries don't matter. And actually, one such case did happen recently when a Melbourne job site was shut, or at least workers were told they're needing to get vaxxed. I'm kind of fuzzy on the details, but you can look it up. And in Victoria during this week, basically, and a tradie dropped his tools and jumped off a building, killed himself. Because of this mandate. So we do know of at least one confirmed, unambiguous case of a poor man offing himself because of the measures of this government, of this Victorian government. But politicians and the affluent among us here in Australia, they are simply tone deaf. They believe their world is their nice, comfortable world around them is the extent of the world, and that all that they see that is cherry picked and handed to them, curated by major media orgs, that is apparently the world as it really is. They don't care any bit for proper on-the-ground investigation, or at least just looking at other independent content makers, independent journalists who actually get real footage on the ground, which again I will link below so you can see what's really happening at these protests in Melbourne, and just in Melbourne generally, which is pretty much in martial law right now. Not officially, but effectively it is. So it shows that they're extremely tone deaf, and they don't believe that there are any legitimate concerns about, and I've got to be careful with my words because this is YouTube here we're talking about, they don't believe there's any legitimate concerns about certain treatments, and and as well over people's livelihoods for simply not wanting to get a certain treatment. They believe all those concerns are just conspiratorial, they're wingnut, they're totally out of thin air, they're totally unjustified, which is of course bull. Even if you ultimately disagree with it, it does still take some digging, and you got to reckon with genuine, serious concerns in order to come to the conclusion anyway that, hey, even if there are these concerns, I'll still get my jab anyway. Okay, if that's your choice, okay, cool, you've made that conscious judgment yourself. You can't deny though that there are genuine concerns people have, and simply dismissing them as wingnuts is not going to help them out. And apparently that's the only thing that the Victorian government, and really all state governments and the federal government here in Australia, know how to do. They don't have any sense of prudence. They don't think that even if they believe their measures are right, that nonetheless they have to balance that out with what the likely reaction of the people is going to be. Instead, it's just not, we're just going to go pure idealism. We're just going to do exactly what we want. Damn the consequences. And, well, consequences. And so no sense of prudence, no concept of understanding others' perspectives, which is ironic because many of these same people I see who are all just shouty at this stuff. Oh no, these are wingnuts, how dare they? They're neo-Nazis, blah blah blah, anti-vaxxers, blah blah blah. They tend to be of the same people of that worldview, where in other contexts, so if we're talking about gay issues and all that, among other things, that they'll say, oh, we need to understand these other people's perspectives. We need to learn to listen to other people's perspectives. But then, no. As soon as it comes to these groups that are popular media and among other major interest groups that they don't like, oh, no understanding of them. No. They're just bad. No. We just, no way. So that's really my first major thought. Now, my second one, and I think it's really pertinent theologically, especially in light of how I'm making a major long-form video on this very topic, on the rights of the state, the jurisdiction that God gave it, where it ought not to go. These Melbourne uprisings by tradies, I think, are a huge test for people like me who believe in a doctrine of the lesser magistrate. So, for those who do not know, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate is a historically reformed doctrine, typically ascribed to John Calvin, and you can read it actually right here in his Institutes of the Christian Religion, book 4, chapter 20. And he doesn't name a doctrine of the lesser magistrates, but the way he describes the role of those lesser rulers under higher rulers. So if a higher ruler is being wicked, tyrannical and all that, it is the responsibility. The common people do not have a right to just simply uprise and cause anarchy, because in the end, living under a tyranny that at least maintains some semblance of order, even if it's tyrannical and wicked, is better than living in anarchy. And it's very hard to dispute that. But as a middle way, and really as just a true way, in my opinion, it is incumbent, not just as a right, but as a duty on the lower rulers to basically resist, and if they can, even depose the higher wicked rulers. So it's a very sensible doctrine, very true. There's tons of precedent you can find for it throughout Holy Scripture. But this scenario, and really many others before this across the world and here in Australia, but now especially here because now it's actually manifesting, this scenario is really putting a test. Because on one hand, normally a popular uprising like this, and I won't say it's like an uprising per se, where they're trying to overthrow the government, or they're not. But nonetheless, civil unrest like this, where there's fighting, there's brawling, throwing stuff at the cops and all that, that would typically be considered unlawful, anarchic behavior by the common people. And I'd say, yep, that's fair enough, that's normal. However, this didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't simply say, these tradies didn't come up and simply say, no, we're just going to cause anarchy because we don't like this thing, that's it. In fact, they, if anything, really did the proper procedure at first. Because for one, okay, there really is there's no lesser magistrate to appeal to, all right? All government levels in Victoria, so their state government, all the way down to local level, because local governments, unlike the United States, for example, they really have no power. They have nothing. Police forces are more or less controlled by the state, by the state government. So there's really nothing that local lesser magistrates, quote unquote, can do. And we're not seeing any judges going against these orders. Now, with the good exception of some Supreme Court cases, New South Wales Supreme Court cases, there's a handful of them, all happening late September, so this month, and through to October, where they're actually trying to not charge, but basically they're trying to, how would I say it? They're trying to deem the health orders by the New South Wales government illegitimate, that they are overstepping the bounds of the powers actually given to them in the Constitution, and even in the otherwise still quite draconian Biosecurity Act of 2015, that even in those measures, they overstep their bounds. And God willing, they're successful, because if they are successful, that could basically mean everything, all these restrictions, all these lockdowns, limits, perhaps even the QR code bullcrap that we got all the way back in last year when things were quite more open, all of that could be gone if these cases are successful, God willing. So please do pray for that. I'll link them below as well, because the New South Wales Supreme Court is actually streaming them on YouTube. And there's certain dates for them, and I'll try to find them. I'll maybe post about them later. Nonetheless, either way, so there are lesser magistrates potentially who may do something, assuming these judges do see a legal case that, yes, actually the New South Wales government is overstepping their bounds. But also, more importantly, that they just say, look, what's happening is tyranny, and I, as a lesser magistrate, have a responsibility to do something about it. Nonetheless, in Victoria, these tradies simply don't have that recourse. Their immediate livelihoods, just being able to put bread on the table, is being threatened, actively taken away by their government. Their lesser magistrates do nothing. So they go to an even lesser magistrate, that is their local union, which does have some degree of power and pressure that it can exercise on the government. So really, their local union, even if it's technically not a government body, is in some form a lesser magistrate. They went to that union and they demanded action, and that union just threw them under the bus. It's just said, no, going along with the government. You're paying copious fees for us to actually represent you and defend your rights, but no, we're not going to do that. So their last line of defense, their last line of legitimate defense by a magistrate, so to speak, even though, again, technically not a magistrate, but just by another organized body, that was taken away from them. What else do they really have to do? Now, of course, there's been bad incidents of, I've at least heard one, for example, one guy at a protest just kicking a bystander's dog. That's obviously atrocious. That's wrong. Among a surprisingly small number of incidents, there's really been very few genuinely bad incidents at these protests. Of course, disregarding active resistance and scuffles with the cops, which in this case, when we're talking about government tyranny, not condemning or condoning. That's all I need to say. Because in the end, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about an active tyranny here and men whose livelihoods are about to be taken away from them. But that's the difficult part of this, is they have zero recourse. What else can they do? Are they expected to simply lay over and have their lives ruined and also allow the government just to simply steamroll over everybody else? Because there's tradies now, but even the Victoria government is already announcing now mandated jabs for other lines of work, such as teachers, which is already about to be the case for here in New South Wales for me. But what else can they do? When the lesser magistrates fail, what can be done?
One eternity later.
Anyway, sorry about that. Mum just had to talk with me for a second. Love my mum. Press, give me a like and give me a comment. We all love our mums. Heart for mum. Amen. Anyway, yeah, pretty much all this stuff that's happening. Like, if the lesser magistrates themselves all fail universally, what is there left? Not saying anarchy, but nonetheless, these tradies do seem very, very well controlled in their otherwise unrest in the city of Melbourne. They're not just going around smashing businesses and all. They're not like a Black Lives Matter protest, so to speak. They're marching through. They're making themselves known, and they're causing a major inconvenience to the police, to put it very lightly. Of course, there's a few unfortunate characters here and there in the protests. Although then again, if that's the standard by which you judge every protest, then, well, every protest in human history is illegitimate. So yeah, you don't want to try to be consistent with that one. You don't want to try to do that principle at all. That's a big one myself. I'm still kind of thinking about this myself. I'm inclined to think that, look, when the lesser magistrates all fail, that really it is incumbent on the people themselves to start making a tussle, even if it's not sanctioned by any other magistrate. Ideally, and in fact I dare say it must be the case, that there should be some recognized leaders among this otherwise popular movement in order to keep it controlled and all that stuff. And as far as I'm aware, there's not really a central protest ahead of these tradies, but nonetheless, from what you will see in genuine protest footage, and it's not just tradies, by the way, tons of other people are protesting as well, especially from prior protests in Melbourne, which involved way more than just tradies. They appear quite controlled, but you've got to consider, how would I say it? It's a tough question. It's a tough question. What do you do at this point? And I'm inclined towards the position that at this point, it's justified for them to go up and start making a noise for themselves, because the lesser magistrates have just all failed. You think that way? You think otherwise, differently? Let's hit it in the comments. Let's have that discussion, because it's really it's not just some airy fairy theological speculations. This is stuff that's real world. It affects the real world right now. So it's good to come to a debate and come to an ultimate solution, so that we know what to do beyond here. Anyway, that is this week's Christendom Weekly. I'm going to hopefully try something new next week, where I actually record individual segments on the day that I find a story. So obviously my clothes will change up and all that. But what it will allow for me is I'll simply find something interesting. I'll be like, oh, cool, let's talk about this and comment on it right now. Record then and there, bang, awesome. Save it to the end of the week and compile it all into one big story. I reckon that's actually pretty cool and efficient. Much more efficient than just gathering stuff and recording it all at once in the early in the morning in Australia. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it informs you a little bit. Do follow these links I have below to really show you the on-the-ground life of what it's like in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. And as I've said before, do keep praying for us, please, because it is bad. It is tyranny right now, unironic tyranny. And it simply needs to be stopped one way or another. Anyway, God bless. Hope you enjoy. Do remember, if you're not subbed already, subscribe and click that notification bell so you can actually see when my content comes in. But also follow my other social media, in particular my alternatives like Gab, BitChute, Odysee, so on, so that you can keep getting my content even if the Zuck decides to nuke me one day. Anyway, God bless. Hope your day is well.